yeah. All right, Ronnie. Funny, ha ha.
Oh, see, Roger, I heard you had COVID, you see, and you might have this new terrible strain that's transmissible over the internet. So I can't take any chances.
Yeah, I got this yesterday. So
yeah, you got a positive reading, but anyway, I can't see anything, so I'm going to take a risk, Roger. Take this off because I can't.
Yeah. I think it might be okay on the grounds that we're not even in the same
take
country.
a chance on it,
Right.
Yeah.
So I've been reading some research, right, which says that they're researching whether flatulence can spread COVID, and I suppose it kind of makes sense. But what I want to say is it's foggy outside, and I live near the coast. You know, I'm faster than most, and I live near the coast. And so if you hear a noise like it's not me, it's the foghorn. Right?
That's a good excuse, isn't
it?
Yeah. And I suppose if anyone smells anything, it's one of the cats.
Well, yeah. Or it could be just a waft.
So that would mean if it's spread by flatulence, that would probably mean that vegans would be super spreaders, wouldn't they? Of it.
Yeah, I suppose maybe they are. So so I've got a bit of COVID, but I don't feel too bad. My throat, my voice is a bit dicky, as you can tell. So if I have to have a coughing fit, I might mute myself and turn my camera off if it gets too bad. But I don't think so. So Ronnie, that means that you're going to have to talk a little bit more than usual. Can you?
Well, I've got my cup of tea here to wet my whistle, and I must say that I very much admire you for carrying on with this, Rog, and despite
you're supposed to drink your tea, you know.
Yes, I'll try to remember. And this is Abby.
Welcome everybody coming into the house.
It's usually Misty that's on my knee, but this is Abby.
What happened to Misty? You've had a coup.
Misty, she's around somewhere, but Abby is about.
Have you got a queue? Because you've got about 25, haven't you?
Yeah, we got a few. I mean, not as many now, sadly, because they're all. We've lost some this year because they're all getting older. But Abby's about 14, I think, and she's not too bad.
Hello, spiritual vegan. You see, this is it. Long-term vegan power.
That's it. But it varies from person to person. You know, some people hardly notice it, and other people are very ill, aren't they? With the COVID.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I shouldn't be so light-hearted about it. I know that Declan was telling me back into Daylight Manager that that in Ireland the health people are saying that the latest kind of strain is fairly mild, so that's a good sign, I suppose. So I'm gonna get a test delivered, well, 2 tests delivered tonight, and so just in case it's a false positive, you know, because and I did notice it's interesting. You see that line; it's very distinct. You know, the C line. And I noticed on the literature it said even if it's very faint, you should regard it as a positive. And so I was thinking,
I think it's the T. Isn't it the T line is the C line is the control, isn't it? And the T line's the test. Is that how it is?
I think it's a C line that says you've got it.
You don't even know what line. I forget now. I haven't done one for so long.
Well, put it this way: if you got 2 lines, you've fucking got it.
If you've got 2 lines, you're buggered. If you've got 3 lines, I don't know what that is.
3 lions. Now, on a slightly somber note, as people join us, and thank you very much for tuning in, everyone. Neil Robinson, the first vegan footballer, it's his funeral today, so we're thinking about him today. So I don't know whether, because we were speculating, weren't we, Ronnie, that hopefully, I mean, obviously, I suppose a few Everton fans will go, but I'm hoping some vegan activists will go.
Some local vegans in Liverpool hopefully will go along. Yeah. Oh yeah, this is Colleen being optimistic. Thanks very much there. Still get sicker. She's still talking about the COVID issue, not about anything, any other aspect of you.
We're talking to you if it was sense of humour. No. Right. I suppose we better get on with this.
Yes,
Yeah.
get on with our number
So-
8
so-
show, isn't it?
So this is something that we've been thinking about for a while, and I think that I'd like to preface it by saying that this is not a go at anybody. This is more where we are now, given our experience back then and now, really, isn't it, Ronnie? So
It is, yes, because both of us have done all sorts of different forms of activism. Probably the virtually the whole lot between us, because we've been around so long. So it does give us an ability to kind of assess the sort of value of the different types, I suppose.
and I think the first kind of broad point to make is that the real problem in activism is not that somebody might be doing something wrong, although in a way that's our kind of position, but it's more the ones who don't do anything, isn't it? That's the real problem.
The overriding problem is now the number of vegans that aren't active at all, and that don't do any form of activism. That's the number one problem. That only a tiny percent. I mean, I always feel that the first thing someone's got to do is change themselves, rather than going out and telling other people what to do. Is the second thing. I think first of all, you kind of become vegan yourself, and more people have done that these days. But sadly, very few of those people go any further than that. Very few of those people are active in spreading the vegan message, or indeed in any other form of activism. And I think that's the number one problem. And that if we want to achieve animal liberation, that's the most vital thing we somehow need to overcome.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is, I mean, like Bernie Wright and I were out about 3, maybe 4 years ago now, and we saw a bus shelter with a Macbeth advert on it, and so she took a picture of me kind of booting it, the advert, and somebody, this is only 2 or 3 days ago, said, "Oh, is the suede on your trainers real suede?" kind of thing. And so you are right that people are always looking, aren't they, for consistency, because they want to call you an hypocrite. And so
yes.
If you've got, I mean, presumably even say anti-vivisectionists, do they get, I mean, they must get asked whether they eat other animals or stuff like that.
Yes, I'm sure. I've had it. I've had it in the street where people look at your shoes. You see them looking down at your shoes.
I know. Yeah.
And I was thinking of having, fuck on one shoe and off on the other shoe, so for when they look down.
I've seen people reach over the table to look at your shoes.
Yeah, they want to. the shoe lookers. Yeah,
the shoe lookers.
Do you want a closer view of my boot? Here you go.
Yeah, you can have them between your eyes. But
yeah.
So we've got 3 concepts which we've called pressure, relating to pressure campaigns, education, we're talking about vegan education,
yes.
And what was the other one? Rescue. So
yes.
Jump into the third one. You've got an interesting distinction between rescue and what you call rescuism, right?
Rescuism. Well, you see, I define rescuism as the saving of individual. Oops, we got another cat. That's
Jump in the queue there.
It's me trying to get in on the show. Yeah, rescuism I define as saving individual animals without tackling the underlying reason why those animals are oppressed in the first place. So it doesn't just apply to the kind of conventional animal rescue, animal sanctuaries and stuff like that. It would apply to apply to things like hunt sabs. It would apply to sea shepherd, where people are going out trying to save animals as individuals or animals as a group of individuals, without tackling the reason why those animals are being oppressed in the first place. And that's how I define rescuism.
Do anybody do that though? I mean, don't they always contextualize it?
I think within themselves, a lot of people do. I mean, we were guilty of this in the old days. No, the ALF did that. The ALF would, carry out animal rescue, but there was kind of no reference to the overriding reason why those animals were oppressed in the first place, which is obviously speciesism and human supremacism. This is why we have the oppression. It's the fundamental reason we have the oppression of other animals. And
but that was also the fundamental reason why you agreed, or kind of got pushed into it, really, being the press officer, yeah?
The reason I felt the press office was important for the ALF was to explain to the public, or attempt to explain to the public, why people were carrying out those actions.
Yeah.
And it was kind of, I think it was kind of only sort of partially successful, because you're still in the hands of the media as to what they publish and what they don't publish. But even that didn't really go to the fundamental reason. It would say, well, people have attacked a laboratory, an animal research laboratory, because of animal experimentation is wrong. But they didn't go deeper than that, because what's deeper than that, and the reason we have experiments on animals, the fundamental reason for that is speciesism, isn't it?
But that was your job, wasn't it, to say that to everybody?
Yes, but I didn't go that deep, because I was kind of guilty is the right word, of the same thing, of having a kind of rescuist mindset towards it, where
and coupled with single issueism.
Well, I think there's the two things. I think there's a link between those two things. Now, I'm not saying that it's a bad thing for people to rescue animals. I think
no, of course, no.
People that run sanctuaries are brilliant. I think Sea Shepherd's brilliant. I think Hunt Sabres are brilliant, and I wouldn't want to see an end to that. But what I would want to be included in all those things is a challenge to speciesism. It is an inclusion of vegan education within those campaigns. That's what I'd like to see. Like, I'd like to see, say, on the Hunt Sabres website and in the Hunt Sabres literature, stuff encouraging people to become vegan. The same with Sea Shepherd. I'm not aware whether or not they have that anyway, but probably not. I'd like to see that. I would like to see animal rescues do more to promote veganism, especially when those rescues are run by vegans. I mean, if they're not run by vegans, they're not going to promote veganism. But I mean, some rescues that are run by vegans do promote veganism, at least to some extent.
I think the only rescues that I know at the moment are vegan-run ones. Back into Daylight Eden.
I think a lot of the farmed animal, what we've got now that we didn't have in the past, are lots of rescues for farmed animals. I remember going back to the 70s.
Yeah,
you didn't really get that. The rescues were for dogs and cats, maybe for rabbits, perhaps.
It's another anomaly, isn't it? Because I see vegans now saying, "What are you saying? There's an animal sanctuary, and the people are not vegan, and they can't kind of believe it." But that's most of them in those days, isn't it?
Oh yes, animal sanctuaries aren't vegan, and the other thing, of course, is you get wildlife rescues and wildlife hospitals, where the people who run those places aren't vegan. I mean, a few months back, I went to an open day for one of our nearest wildlife hospitals. And they do great work. We actually took a bird. We happened to kind of take a sickly bird to them at the same time as we went to the open day. It was just by chance. There was somebody had found this bird in their garden, and we picked her up on the way. And they do brilliant work. But what shocked me, but kind of sadly didn't surprise me, was at this open day, they had a burger van. They had stalls selling all sorts of animal products, and yet the probably the greatest cause of the destruction of wildlife on this planet is animal farming and industrialized fishing. Animal farming is probably the number one cause of the deaths of
but
of
they're seeing themselves as
living
a
beings.
kind of animal A&E, aren't they?
Yeah, but the thing is, so they're kind of they're tackling what you might say a minor part of the problem while contributing to like a major part. And if they genuinely sort of care about wildlife, about free living beings, then you know their open day would be entirely vegan. You know, they wouldn't be selling what you're selling animal products for. What you contributed to these industries that devastate wildlife when you're supposed to be people that are there to kind of protect wildlife and cure, you know, care for wildlife.
Well,
And that's
I think
that's an
they'd
example of
say
that.
that their mission statement is to help those in immediate need and in emergency situations. It's not to criticize.
Well, but you see the animals now that are being devastated, you know, because of the climate crisis, you know, for which animal farming bears a huge responsibility, and you know the kind of you know the whole ecological crisis to which animal farming and you know and fishing contributes. Those animals are, you know, millions of those animals are kind of dying and suffering now. It's just that people aren't able to see that. A lot of people aren't able to see that because, in a sense, it's immediate. It's happening now, but it's not immediately in front of them, and that's the problem. And that's some, you know, huge inconsistency there of those people promoting animal products while seeking to protect wildlife.
Well, I mean, I can kind of understand it if they're non-vegan. It's just if they're vegan, then that's weird, isn't it?
Well, the thing is, I think there's, I think any vegans involved in stuff like that wouldn't be happy with animal products being sold at their events. But those vegans are undoubtedly in the minority of those involved, and so they're kind of, you know, they have to kind of go along with it, I suppose. But I think that, you know, my kind of issue with vegan run sanctuaries is I think a lot of them could do more to actually promote veganism.
Well, I mean, luckily the ones that
with,
I know in Ireland do that.
Yeah, and there are some. To be fair, there are some. There's some here in England that do that too. But I think I think all sanctuaries, and certainly vegan-run sanctuaries, should be thinking, what more can we do to promote veganism? Because the reason those animals are in those sanctuaries, the reason they have to care for those animals, is because people consume animal products. You know, is because of speciesism, is because of human suppression. That's the reason those animals are there. We need to tackle that fundamental cause of it all if ever we're going to move forward.
Ethically based ex omnivore is going to pull a Jesus. Interesting phrase.
Pull a Jesus. Is that like is that kind of what happens on a date?
No, it's as you well know, Mr. Lee. It's when you go into an abusive situation and start making a fuss. So,
Yes. I mean, I kind of, yes. I mean, I did make my views known regarding this, you know, the wildlife rescue. Of course, you know, politely.
I think the truth is of those three, and we've been involved with all three of them. We're talking about, you know, the pressure, the education, and the rescue. The reason that we've been pulled to the education is these fundamental points that you've already made. And my own story, I came to realization just driving down the road. I once took some vegans to open a vegan restaurant. We drove to Spain, and where they were opening this restaurant, and they'd asked me to drive them. And so I drove them there, and I was noticing all the so-called live stock lorries and all that, and all the factory farms. And it's really interesting in the sense that vegans notice things like that much more than vegetarians. And some vegetarians will notice that much more than, say, you know, a flesh consumer. So I got to the stage where I was going sabbing, and we'd be like 30 miles away. And I'd be kind of driving past several farms and maybe a couple of laboratories, right? And I was thinking, hang on a second, you know, is this the best use of my time, you know.
Yes.
And especially when you think that in hunting, it is true that the fox does have a chance, not necessarily a great one, but they do have a chance of getting away. But I know they can have all kinds of health problems because of the stress of the chase and all that. But in that sense, it was kind of, well, these are kind of death camps I'm driving past. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So it
Yeah.
started not to make any sense to me. I think I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I kind of, you know, I'm very much like that. I'm always looking at how can I use my time in the most effective way, especially now when with getting older and you know I haven't got so much energy anymore. I need to sleep a bit more than I used to and stuff like that. So that's become even, you know, even more vital that I try to focus on that which I think is the most important.
Well, actually, I think our age does play a role in our analysis now, because you're thinking, how many years have we got left to do this, aren't we?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, and I think there's also the experience of having so many years, you know, of involvement in various, you know, forms of campaigning as well. But you see, I think there's another thing about in relation to so like a hunting, animal experiments, and all these things. If you ever want to kind of really like put an end to those things, then obviously, you know, what we really want is legislation prohibiting those things. Now, there's supposed to be legislation here in the UK prohibiting hunting, but of course it doesn't do that at all. It's nowhere near strong enough, and it's nowhere near properly enforced. And in order to change that, to get these you know really decent laws in place and properly enforced, you know, to end all these various areas of the oppression of other animals, we have to have the right people in government. We have to have the right people who will pass the laws and make sure that they're properly upheld. And the only way we're going to do that is by having loads more vegans, you know, in charge, so to speak. You know, we need a lot more vegan politicians to be elected and to have the say so. The only way you do that is by creating more vegans, so that we've got more vegans to vote for them. So once again, vegan education is like a fundamental way of dealing with all these single issues. You know, and without that, we're going to be battling, or people can be battling against hunting, battling against animal experiments forever, unless we deal with these things that are more fundamental.
I always say to people who are making the case for pressure campaigns or single issues or whatever, I always say, do you think that there are more ethical vegans out there, as in society? And they always invariably say yes. And I say, well, in that case, there's nothing more important to go and find them, and especially not more important to get them to be active, ethical vegans. And so we've got this thing that there's people that are not in the movement yet, but we're hoping that they will. And then there's people in the movement that we've got to kind of talk to on the ethical level as well. And then, you see, before we start talking about politics, it seems to me that cultural base has got to. Yeah. And I think you'd agree with that, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. The politics comes from the cultural base, but the cultural base is kind of cultural base, though, kind of isn't enough without the politics, because just because the vast majority of people, say, in the country are opposed to something, doesn't mean that is going to come to an end. And we've got had a prime example of that with fox hunting, where, you know, decade after decade after decade, according to public opinion polls, a huge majority of the public was opposed to fox hunting, and indeed still is.
And even yet, more with hare coursing,
and even more with hare coursing. And I think it's also probably the case with animal experimentation, although I've heard it kind of claimed to be the case with animal experimentation as well. But that doesn't make any difference. Having that majority of people opposed to those things made no difference until we were able to get the politicians there. Well, with hunting, until we were able to get the politicians there to bring in a ban, although it wasn't a proper ban, right? After decades and decades and decades of people being a big majority of people opposed to fox hunting, we eventually got some legislation to do something about it. So just having a majority of people opposed to something, or having a majority of people wanting change, doesn't necessarily make a difference unless we have the politicians there in Parliament to create that.
Yeah, well, with this kind of scenario or this model, if you had the hunting ban after you get vegans in Parliament, then first of all, it's going to have an easier trip through Parliament in the first place. But secondly, it's not going to be full of loopholes like the ban is now, right?
It's full of loopholes because basically the law should have been one which caused hunts to totally be dismantled. You know, that would have destroyed their infrastructure. You see what's happened is they've got this kind of, now they're allowed to kind of follow a trail, and of course very often they don't, and they actually chase the live animal instead, and we all know that happens and the law's not enforced. But you see, while their infrastructure's that's still there, while they've still got the hunt kennels and they've still got the stables, and they've got all the kind of, you know, the kind of operational side of it still intact, then it's very easy for them to switch to like.
Well, this is what I mean, because the conversation that went on during the hunt ban thing, and we both did the TV interviews and the radio interviews and all of us. It was about things like pest control, it was about conservation, and it was about animal welfare. Animal rights didn't even get a mention.
No, and the other thing that didn't get a mention was or hardly any mention was the fact that they kill thousands of their dogs every year. Thousands of the foxhounds are killed every year. Now that's still happening. That's still happening. Whether those dogs are chasing after a live fox, or whether they're supposedly following a trail, ones that aren't up to it, they're still going to kill them, and that still goes on. And that's that's just as important an issue as what happens to the fox or the hare or whatever other animals they're pursuing. You see, and this is why that legislation is like massively too weak. But the other problem is the enforcement, that it's not enforced because there's no will from the government to enforce it. And in fact, I think our current government is actually opposed to it being properly enforced. And this is the problem. So we need to totally change the nature of politics and politicians, and you only do that by creating more vegans.
I agree. There was something that came up. Something that came up on my kind of feed this morning, as it were, because I was up pretty early with not being able to sleep, and let me see if I can get it up, because I'd be interested in your kind of view about this, because I was hoping, because it was Compassion in World Farming that broke this news, right? And so I was hoping that people wouldn't, vegans wouldn't be drawn into this thing. So it's back to this issue that vegans seem to me, you talk about missing the fundamentals. They get hooked up here that, we found some cruelty on an RSPCA backed farm, right? Well, yeah, but you're gonna. I mean, there's some pretty horrible videos, so I won't show that.
No.
But it's got the details here. But the point is, well, yeah, it's animal use, which means animal rights violations. What do you expect to be happening on a farm, regardless of whether the RSPCA give it a bloody award and call it Red Tractor or not?
Absolutely. Until the RSPCA advocate veganism, they are going to be an organisation that stands for the oppression of other animals.
But it is by its very nature, though, Ronnie.
Yes, it's by its very nature. Now, it's kind of there's a possibility that if you had the right people in control of the RSPCA, they said they go, right, that's it. We're going to promote veganism.
The RSPCA would be about 20 times smaller.
Whether it'd be 20 times smaller or not, I mean, in a kind of much more minor way, there was a change in the RSPCA years ago, because up until the 1970s, the RSPCA was not opposed to hunting. And the hunters would always use this. Well, what we're doing is not cruel because the RSPCA isn't against it. And indeed, there were, lots of hunters were members of the RSPCA and were even on their ruling council.
Exactly what circuses used to say.
Yeah, yeah. And so what happened was there was a move. There was an organisation set up called the RSPCA Reform Group, and what they did was they got loads of anti-hunt people to join the RSPCA, and they voted out all these pro-hunt people on their ruling council, and voted in a load of anti-hunt people, and we managed to change the policy. Now in theory, the same could be done with regard to veganism. Whether it's worth the effort is another question, but that could be done. Enough vegans join the RSPCA, vote out all the non-vegans, have vegans on their council, and then that's it. Then they become totally pro-vegan.
You're talking about a long battle.
Yeah, you're talking about. Well, once again, it's another question of like, is that the best use of our resources? And it
is, isn't it? I mean, yeah. Joanne, you say I think lowly of the RSPCA. So that reminds me when Ed Winters put his new book out, he had a chapter in it saying the RSPCA is a paradoxical organisation. But the thing about that is it's not. It's a traditional animal welfare organisation.
Yeah, they're welfarists. I've never expected
but they're traditional welfarists as well. They've never been set up to abolish anything. You know, I mean, maybe haircutting they might support that.
Well, I think it's kind of, you know, that they tinker around the edges, don't they? You know, now they'll be kind of.
Well, they're looking for what is popular with their members.
Yeah. It's like it's kind of lowest common denominator stuff, isn't it? Really. And I think, you know, there's areas in which, you know, they do some good. They do have, and I think you kind of have to distinguish between local branches and the central RSPCA, because a lot of the RSPCA local rescue centres.
Well, yeah, I mean the officers, the kind of inspectors. I mean they do a lot of good work, but I mean that's not what we're talking about. You still there, Ronnie?
Yes, yeah. I'm just reading Bernie's comment.
Oh, right. Okay.
Well, I don't think fox hunters should be compensated at all. I just think it should be like fox hunting bans. Then, you know, yes. I mean, what happens is that, you know, they're killing these dogs all the time. And say if it was prohibited, yeah, there would be you know, a considerable number of foxhounds that would need to be cared for. But that could be done. You know, force the fox hunters. A lot of them are wealthy people. Force them to subsidise it. Make them pay. I'd give these buggers no compensation whatsoever.
Well, you know how legislation works. So it's always going to be part of the deal.
If we had a vegan government, we wouldn't give them compensation. They'd be lucky not to be jailed, to be quite honest, for their activities. You know, but this is what I'm talking about, that you don't give these people compensation, because like, what are they going to spend that compensation on anyway? You know.
I've just screwed up.
You switched it around, Rog. That was clever. That was neat.
That was a bit tricky.
Yeah.
All I'd say again to Joanna is that the RSPCA are not a disappointment to me, because it's a traditional animal welfare group, and that's what they do.
No, they're not a disappointment to me either. I mean, it would be great if they didn't. You know, they actually promote the slaughter of other animals. They promote animal agriculture, because if they're not promoting veganism, there's like, you're either one side or you're the other, aren't you? You know what I mean? And they're not promoting veganism. You know, they're saying that all these animal farms giving them the stamp of approval, and whether cruelty or, you know, takes place at those farms or not, animals from those farms are still taken and slaughtered, at a very a fraction of their natural lifestyle. That still goes on. They could be sleeping on like golden couches in those farms. It'd still be wrong.
Well, we can guarantee that that's not happening. But I mean, this is the theme of my next time tunnel, in the sense that I've given the case for the prosecution that the animal rights movement kind of doesn't exist, and then the next one's going to be the welfare group saying it doesn't matter because we can do both, which is kind of what you're saying. And it's kind of with the RSPCA, they're not even trying to do both, because they haven't got a vegan angle to anything. Whereas with groups like, you know, PETA, see, even Compassionate Farming, I don't think they've got a vegan stance.
No, they haven't. You know, it's let's carry on with the farming, animal farming.
But we shouldn't get confused by that. That's who they are, isn't it?
But I think, and I think people are confused, and a lot of people that are kind of, I think back in the day we weren't confused, to be honest. I mean, I think there were people that promoted compassion in world farming, but I think they did that with no illusions. I think they understood what compassion in world farming was all about, and that they were welfareists and they weren't animal rights. I think these days a lot of people that are kind of newly vegan don't really understand that.
It's that thing about pushing. It's that thing about pushing the envelope forward. And I think Doug mentioned something like that before. If I can find it, I'm not sure if I can now. But,
yeah.
But you know, I mean, this is why you've got groups like Peter giving awards to Temple Grandin for designing high welfare slaughterhouses.
The thing is, as I see it,
so you can do both. Their argument is, why can't we do both?
Well, because one conflicts with the other, doesn't it? One conflicts with the other.
Not in their eyes. Not in their eyes. It's not. It's one is moving us towards the other. That's what they would argue.
But I think whether welfareism moves us towards liberation or moves us towards animal rights, I think it's highly questionable whether that does that. I mean, kind of, you know, my experience in Louis and I ran a campaign against the greyhound racing industry for quite a few years, and you know, we want total abolition of dog racing. We wanted the public to boycott dog racing. We wanted the public not to bet on dog racing, right? And at the time, the League Against Cruel Sports were calling for, oh well, we need kind of better welfare, we need more homes for the dogs, we need to make the tracks safer for the dogs and all those things. And we hated what they were doing because, you know, in my mind, that gave people an excuse to carry on going to dog racing, because people would think,
it's like those campaigns to get steeplechase.
You
know, the fences
get in the way of abolition, because people think, oh well, you know, I can carry on still going to the dogs because they're going to bring in these measures to make it like, you know, slightly less terrible, so I can carry on going to. It's like the RSPCA with this, that they're like RSPCA approved or Red Tractor, whatever it's called now. You know, people think, oh, I can buy this meat with a clear conscience because there's like nothing wrong with it because the RSPCA has approved it. So in actual fact, that makes it harder to educate people to become vegan, in the same way as what the League were doing. Now, the League is now totally against dog racing, thankfully. It took them years to arrive at that position. But when they were campaigning for welfare, we hated it because it was like impeding what we were trying to do. It was impeding the drive for abolition, you know, and it does get in the way like that. And also a question of your energy. You know, all this energy people put into, like, you know, like massive amounts of money, time, effort put into, say, oh, you know, we'll try and get bigger cages for battery hens. Well, wouldn't that energy be better put into actually educating people to go vegan? Wouldn't that achieve more? Wouldn't that have, you know, bigger results? Even just in you know, because for everyone that goes vegan, I mean, certainly like here in England, everyone that goes vegan, that equates to you've prevented the demand for over 100 animals every year to be slaughtered. So you could argue that even in terms of just sparing the lives of other animals, that the most
if you're trying to take, well, let's kind of do a Francione type analysis. What he would say is that by doing what you just said, Ronnie, these groups would be reducing their support base drastically, and that means that they'd be having to make people redundant. They'd have to take wage cuts, and they're not going to do that. They're going to try and keep everybody on board and try to say things that are okay for the welfarists and okay for the vegans.
Yeah, that's their rationale for it. But in terms of achieving animal liberation, it's not the way to go. It's obviously not the way to go, you know, because
their model is that it is. I mean, they would say that they're getting there one welfare reform at a time.
But it's kind of not, because the you know, the welfarist attitude is sends out a message to people, oh, it's all right for these animals to continue to be oppressed as long as we do it in a nicer way. That's the message of welfareism, and that's the message that's going out, and that's entirely opposite to the vegan message. It's entirely contrary to what we're trying to say.
Just thinking about the one issue we haven't talked about, I suppose, is pressure campaigns. Now,
Yes.
Now, obviously, as soon as we start talking about pressure campaigns, and just as a side to that, is one feature of pressure campaigns was home visits and stuff. And I was always a bit queasy about doing those, to be honest. But it was kind of, one person said back in 2010 or something that the children of vivisectors is a legitimate target to be shot, kind of thing. And I was thinking, hang on a second, right? And so you've got a problem with home visits, but in terms of pressure, it immediately brings up the issue of supply and demand, doesn't it?
Yeah, you see, pressure campaigns are aimed at a limited area of the oppression of other animals, and they're often aimed at putting a particular place out of business. Let's take, for an example, something that's going on at the moment, Camp Beagle, the campaign against to free the MBR beagles. All right. Now, now that's I have solidarity with the people that are doing that. I think it kind of has raised a lot of awareness about the issue, and I think that may result in a reduction in animal experimentation, hopefully. But I think the problem is that if there's no reduction in animal experiments in general, right, that what happens is if you close a particular place down, right, but you don't reduce the demand, then what happens is that one of two things will happen. Either beagles will be supplied to laboratories from somewhere else because they're still doing the same number of experiments, or other animals will be used instead of the beagles.
Just switch species, yeah.
So all it's doing is pushing the problem around. You're pushing the problem around rather than
that's what happened with the ICI smoking beagles, wasn't it?
Yeah. And this is the difficulty, that it kind of is in a sense a false victory. Yeah, if that place was to close and those dogs were to come out, that's brilliant for those individual dogs. But what about the other ones that are going to go from elsewhere to take the place of them if you don't affect the overall demand? Now, I think campaigns like that can affect the overall demand. I mean, we affected the overall demand with the ALF. Like the ALF did close some laboratories down to our activities. And through the years, the ALF was the most active. The number of animal experiments, like here in the UK, did go down drastically. And I think that's because of the pressure that we exerted. So it is possible for a campaign like that to
yeah, but does it mean that they were doing more, say, in the States or Spain or something?
Well, it's kind of it's kind of hard to say about whether the problem gets pushed somewhere else around the world, and I suppose there kind of is a possibility with that. I mean, that would still.
Well, I mean, that's what's happening with the fur thing.
Yeah,
I mean, at the moment there's a big fur-free Europe campaign, right? And
yes.
So they're going to end up in Russia and China, all those minks.
Well, I think it depends on demand. You see, if you've got to kind of reduce, preferably end the demand from people for to wear fur products, and then no demand comes from this country for fur from other countries. I mean, at the moment we've got the situation here where like fur farming's banned in the UK, but the import and sale of fur products isn't. You see, so that's the difficulty that we've got. Is kind of like we're in like a halfway house situation. So, so people in the UK by buying fur or garments that contain fur are still supporting the fur industry in other countries.
And also British fur farmers as well, because they can still bring them. They open up a farm in Europe, then they still send the pelt. Yeah,
that's the problem, and this is why we need an import ban on fur, a ban on the import and sale of fur. But the main thing is, like, people in this country to kind of not wear it. If no one in this country wore it, they all boycotted it, then that'd be the end of it. I mean, it's the same with.
That's the clear way to get rid of it.
That's the same. And
what do you think of this? Going back to what we were saying, Nella is suggesting. I remember Bruce Friedrich saying this at debate with Francione. Don't we have to care about welfare in the same sense that we can care about human prisoners' welfare in cases that we can't liberate them? And so that is actually exactly what the welfare groups and the new welfare groups say, that we can't stop it, but in the meantime, we've got to help.
Well, it kind of depends. You see, my personal views, I can't do everything, and I appreciate that like a hen in a cage that was like, a foot bigger than the cage they're in would probably be slightly better off. You know what I mean? And I can understand people thinking that. But it's a question of like, what is the best use of energy? Is the best use of energy to campaign for like, better conditions for animals who are being oppressed, or is the best use of energy to campaign for an end to it altogether and to persuade people, educate people to be vegan? In my view, the best use of energy is vegan education.
When I joined the movement, tried to join the movement in 1977, the battery cage campaign was already in full swing, and compostable farming were a leading organization. I don't think that they knew that in the struggle to get that, which was going to be years and years and years, that the industry was going to go to enrich battery cages. They thought that they were just going to get them out of the cages. But of course, the industry can't deal with that because they need too many of them just to let them all out into fields, right? Yeah. And so, and you said about a foot bigger, but the stats there is that in rich battery cages, they've got each hen has got more space to about an iPhone.
Yeah, I think a foot was probably exaggeration. But the other thing is that by campaigning for abolition, you get welfare changes, because what happens is the industry is desperately trying to make themselves appear more acceptable. So they'll bring in these welfare improvements themselves in a desperate bid to try to keep the consumer on side. So we, in a sense, don't have to campaign for welfare because we'll get it anyway through campaigning for liberation.
So does that, what you've just said, speak to what Nella said next? For example, we can't free political prisoners, but while we are trying to make sure that they are not tortured. So again, this is the kind of twin track idea that we might advocate for the abolition, but we're trying to get them not tortured. Now, I think the answer to that is what you just said, which is that you can campaign for the abolition, and then if that causes such a stink, they will stop the torture part of it. In the same way as they're trying, like you said, to make it more acceptable and kind of, bring the press in, let them see these new systems and this kind of stuff. The only problem is that animal rights violations are much more or much less visible than human rights violations. And I think somebody said that. I think it was Deb. The thing is, humans can advocate for themselves, other animals can't, and so again, animal use is often behind either closed doors in dark sheds or in laboratories which have got razor wire all the way around them. And so the idea that even if they agree not to torture, how do we even check on that? And secondly,
well, we've had this case of the CCTV and slaughterhouses thing, haven't we?
Yeah.
Where it's been shown that despite the fact they've got CCTV in slaughterhouses, there's still appalling stuff that goes on in them. That's a prime example of, and the only way to deal with it is have no slaughterhouses. Because no one consumes animal products anymore.
It's going back to this RSPCA story that broke today. I mean, like, the thing that vegans shouldn't do is be shocked by it. Well, of course, they're involved with systematic and routine rights violations. Of course, they're going to kick them around and move them around with sticks. And, of course they are. I mean, you know, like it's usually if the press are there or if somebody's filming or something, they might not, which is why the animal advocates have gone undercover, because then the farmers or the vivisectors don't know there's anybody from the animal advocacy community, and then they just go back to what they normally do.
That's right, and I think even with the RSPCA scheme, the farmers get warned that there's going to be an inspection. So of course they tidy everything up, and they're all nicey while the inspectors are there. You know, if ever the inspectors are there, which I think is probably not very often. And then
it's interesting because some of the, as I said, compassionate farming broke this story, and a lot of the comments on Twitter were, "Oh, I would have thought that the RSPCA would do more inspections and they would, you know," but you know, it's that thing about regulating atrocities.
Yeah, because
about how you do it, whether you're talking about political,
you can't regulate the whole thing. The whole thing is irrelevant anyway. Like, you know, we shouldn't be imprisoning these animals in those situations. We shouldn't be using those animals. We shouldn't be oppressing them at all. We should be vegan, and that is the message that needs to be put out loud and clear. And as I've said, it needs to be put out everywhere, and this is why we need instigators of vegan outreach in every locality, so we spread that message and educate.
I was waiting for.
You're waiting for that. I have to say that every show.
Start a book every week.
But that's
how long will it take before Ronnie says the word instigator?
Yeah, but coming back to single issues, all these single issues, right? The fundamental solution to all of them is veganism. The fundamental solution to all of them is vegan education. Now, you know, I'm in solidarity with anyone who campaigns, to protect animals. You know, all these different campaigns. You know, Hunt Sabs and.
Thanks very much, Joanna. By the way, just she's getting rid of the porn sites. That's good.
Right. Okay. What's let me? Oh, I missed that. Can that? So I was going to write that one down. No, no. Where are we? Yes. That's the fundamental solution to all these things. You know, it's great that you know we have people active that want to kind of end.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying, Ronnie. What we've got is we've got vegans who should, by definition, stand for those fundamental things, but they're confused by the RSPCA in the same way that Ed Winters is confused by the RSPCA, and why a lot of his supporters go, "Oh, well, I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop subscribing to the RSPCA now that I know that they're not a vegan organization." Like, where did they get the idea that they were in the first place?
I kind of really don't know, because, you know, back in the day, we never ever considered them a vegan organization. We felt it was important that they came out against hunting. And there was a big campaign. I was involved in it to do that, but we still didn't consider that they were a vegan organization.
And also exotic other animals in circuses. I think they opposed that, right?
Yeah, I think there was one time when maybe they weren't opposed to that, but I'm sure they are now. But you see, that's it. The kind of the whatever people, you know, people are drawn to, and it kind of can be difficult with people are drawn to pressure campaigning because they see it as a kind of immediate thing. You know, let's go to this place where the animals are imprisoned, you know, and let's, you know, be there with placards, and you get the Save movement as well. And there's a very strong emotional pull towards that. But in fact, you know, the place to go if we want to end all those things primarily is ordinary people, because it's the attitudes of ordinary people that actually are causing these things to continue. Because first of all, because people support those things through their own lifestyles, you know, people consume animal products, for instance, and also through the way that people vote, where people constantly vote in governments that are actually not only refuse to abolish those things, but actually support them. You know, the support that the government over here gave to Huntingdon Life Sciences, and they'd have gone under without government support, you know, and all the persecution of activists.
Yeah, I mean that's what's going to happen. I mean, if we
Yeah.
get too powerful, they'll shut
Yes.
us down,
Yeah.
or if they get too threatened, they'll bail them out. What they can't do is stop people stopping to eat them.
Yeah, you see, at the end of the day, we've got to run the show. If we don't run the show, then the people who are in favour of oppression of other animals will run the show. We have to run the show. Vegans have to be in charge, right? The only way we get in charge is by creating enough vegans who can kind of change the political landscape. So
you don't think that if the pressure, even on the existing politicians, was big enough that see, the problem is, we all know, don't we, that most people they vote for. I mean, you know what I'm getting at, which is this from John Bryant, right? So this is from Fettered Kingdoms, the book from '82, and so this seems to me to apply to pressure campaigning, even rescueism and vegan education, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it's important. I think these campaigns do have an educational aspect to them. You know, I think through things like, for instance, through Camp Beagle, people have become more aware of animal experimentation, and, you know, people will become opposed to it, you know, because of that. And hopefully that, you know, when it comes to voting, people will kind of vote for politicians that want to abolish experiments on other animals. You know, there is an educational aspect to that, but I think it's important that the education we put out is at the most fundamental level, which is vegan education, so that people become opposed to all oppression of other animals. You know, so that we have a complete culture change, and, you know, we have an administration that will kind of abolish all those things that will move us towards, you know, plant-based agriculture, for instance, all these things, you know, that we kind of need, you know, desperately.
I mean, we're a little bit back to the anarchism thing, because are we suggesting, given the fact that most people vote on economic matters, are we suggesting that you're going to get enough vegan people to get enough people to vote to force these changes?
Well,
you know, because that's not what people tend to.
Well, it kind of, yeah, but and I think the reason
we can't even get them to vote for the environment.
No, well, the vast majority of people aren't vegan.
So that's our starting point then. So we're back to of the three, it's got to be vegan education, right?
Well, the thing is, you don't need like a majority, because, I mean, our current government here in the UK was voted in by less than 30% of the electorate. You just need a substantial minority, and that's difficult, you know, to kind of change the mindset of 30% of people is still, you know, it's not an easy job, but it's easier than having to change 100%. You know, that's what we're looking for. That's the only way we'll do it. We won't do it any other way, no matter how difficult that might seem. It's the only way we can do it. The only way that we fundamentally change societies, you know, and bring about an animal liberation society is through that. And it's like fundamentally through widespread vegan education. You know, I mean, people will do what they're most attracted to. And, you know, there are people who are kind of very much attracted.
What Nella here is saying is right. I mean, I've always said that single issues can be abolitionized. Now, the way that I look at that is, rather than thinking about single issue campaigns, I tend to think about single issue events. And so you might 1 week go to a circus, or you might 1 week go to somewhere else. But the claims making is that, well, we're vegans, we're opposed to animal use. This is a type of animal use, so therefore we're opposed to it. Yes. But you contextualize it all the time.
That's right. I mean, I do that myself. You know, I'll do stalls on issues of particular areas of the oppression of other animals, but at the same time, I'll give information to people promoting veganism, because it's just a way of attracting the attention of people. And then and I think this is the thing, is not to forget that for campaigners, who are campaigning on these on the single issues, or doing, there are some single issue campaigns, like campaigns to close particular places down, or campaigns that are focused on a particular area of animal oppression, like for instance on vivisection, on hunting, for instance, that they're focused on that particular area. But there's no reason why people, whether it's part of the general overall or campaign, or whether it's part of individual events that people carry out, like street stalls, for instance, why they can't promote veganism at the same time. And I think it's a huge wasted opportunity if they don't.
Well, maybe the problem is the fact that rather than having a social movement, as somebody that will claim, we've actually just got a bunch of corporations and charities. They're all competing for the vegan and the vegetarian dollar, and there's now more people employed in our movement than ever before, so those people have got to be funded. And so you're then into social movement theory, that once you have a job to defend, you think very much more carefully about what you say, because you don't want to offend or put anybody off. You don't want to get people unsubscribing. And this has always been the problem. The fact that your fundamental core values, as soon as you become big enough, can become threatened. And of course, there's a lot of evidence that that's exactly what happens in the animal movement.
Yeah, I think if you get an organization that becomes fairly large and has offices, has staff to employ, has got their pension funds for those staff and all those things, then they'll look to do campaigns that bring in money, rather than campaigns that are the best in terms of bringing about animal liberation. And I think that's always the danger. We kind of see this happening with various organizations that you can see, that like the more short-term campaigns, like a general campaign, like let's have a general go vegan campaign, and let's kind of that's what we're focused on. That isn't going to bring in as much money as a campaign saying let's close down this particular place, because the way people's minds, people are very immediatist in their thinking, which is one of the reasons we're in the shit that we're in, with climate crisis and everything. People only look at what's immediate in front of them, and closing a place down is like a more immediate thing than the general concept of educating people to go vegan. And so those more immediatist campaigns bring in the money, and that's why these organizations do them.
Well, when we were talking about this show, though, Ronnie, we did talk about this is going to raise interesting issues between the psychology of what's going on and the social psychology of what's going on. And we know on an individual level, there are some people who will say straight out that they kind of need to get the kind of victories or the boost or the kind of, yeah, fuck you type thing, right? And they kind of need that. And I think they're suggesting that if I don't get that, I won't continue. Whereas the vegan education thing is kind of, oh, that's long-term, one plate at a time, and all the kind of things that... so the point is, whether we talk about any of this, it's almost as though there's no sense of urgency, it seems to me, because, I mean, do we have time?
I think there is a sense of urgency, and in some ways it's the kind of sense of urgency that's maybe the problem, that people think this, the immediacy, oh, there's a place, there's animals going in this place, let's all go down there, let's get placards, let's all, isn't it terrible, oh, like that. There's that goes on, which is the urgency, of kind of, the immediacy of those animals are in there now, let's go outside there. There's that kind of urgency, which is kind of occurs without analysis of why those animals are going in there, and let's tackle the reason why those animals are going in there. So there's a sense in which there's a way in which that kind of sense of urgency leads people to do what is probably not the most effective thing.
Well, we're right on the button here, because I mean, if you're kind of alluding to say save, now obviously the footage that the save movement has created is being useful. Let's say it's got utility in the movement. What doesn't seem to make much sense is going back to a slaughterhouse in the middle of nowhere every week, rather than because you
yeah,
go, well,
and
look, the animals are going in and there's
yes,
nothing you can do. You kind of wave them into the slaughterhouse. But if you go outside McDonald's in your town centre the next day, the same animals are in there, but they're now chopped into pieces.
yes, yeah. I think the thing is that I think people often confuse with how something makes them feel emotionally with how that affects the outside world. In other words, if they do something that's highly emotional, it's shouting, it's kind of, like raises high emotions in themselves or allows them to express high emotions, that somehow that is more impactful on the outside world than something that is quieter.
Well,
And
I don't know about that
yeah,
because, obviously we've got things like cubes or triangles, what are they
yeah,
called now?
yeah,
Diamonds. Now
yeah.
that's not loud and shouty, is it?
No. But I think I think that that is vegan education.
Yeah, I know.
And that's taking place. That's taking place where people are. You see, if people, very very often these slaughterhouses aren't in populated areas. No, members of the public don't really see what the protesters. Whereas if you're doing something in a city centre, then ordinary people are going to see that. So I can kind of understand that more. What I want to see is vegan education taken everywhere, not just in the centre of big cities, but into local communities, into suburbs of cities, into towns, into villages. And we need instigators of vegan education in all those places to kind of do.
Well, we discussed that in the sense that
Yes,
there is a caveat that for some people that's dangerous, right?
Well, I think well. Yeah, well, I think there are some areas where you wouldn't really want to go around delivering leaflets because there are some rough areas. I agree with that. I mean, I think that's probably the majority of areas probably aren't like that. But then you can always go somewhere else. Choose an area that isn't rough, that isn't so dangerous, and go and do it there, or kind of do it in other ways. Leave leaflets in public places, put them in books in libraries, put them in magazines in supermarkets. Leave them on public transport, or hold information stalls at kind of community events where there's a lot of people around, so you're kind of safer if you think there's. Yes, I mean there are some areas I wouldn't go and door drop. Not very many, but I do know of some where I go and deliver leaflets.
Yeah, so
But that doesn't stop me from going elsewhere.
We could all do that. This you
Yeah.
might find interesting, Ronnie. Now, this is a podcast with a guy called Nick Pendergrast, and so this is on my website. And his research was about why the national groups do not promote consistent veganism. And he basically was saying a lot of things that we've said today. And he said most of it is to do with money. But he did say something interesting because he was saying, look, if we really do need these kind of psychological boosts of a victory, he quoted me saying, well, Roger Yates from the VIP, he says that why don't we just celebrate every new vegan as a victory? You don't have to shut anything down. And so we could have victories all the time. In fact,
Yes.
that way you'd have more victories than if you're having to wait for every 3 years to close an institution down, right?
You kind of would. I mean, I think the difficulty is you very rarely know that you've turned people vegan.
That is the problem. Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of people I know that have gone vegan, or part of them going vegan, because often it's more than one thing.
So it's kind of invisible, isn't it? Whereas if you close somewhere
I know
down
people who have
and
really
you go and get the rabbits, as it were, like we've seen before.
But
they're moving cages
it,
into transit vans.
We know. You see, for instance, like everyone who's become vegan has become vegan because they received information, right? So it stands to reason that the more information we get out there promoting veganism, the more people will become vegan. And it's just a question of getting as much information to as many people as possible in as many different forms as possible. Because I kind of tend to do a lot of my vegan education tends to involve printed materials, distributing leaflets and stuff like that. We do my local vegan group, we do also advertise on social media with videos promoting veganism. We do that as well, so that's part of our outreach. Now there's other ways people can do it. There's people stand with with screens. Yeah,
we ought to do a show on that, Ronnie, where you
Yeah.
can go through the analytics of your Facebook advertising
Yeah, it's kind of it kind of needs a bit of explaining, because it's kind of it's one of those things. It's easy when you know how, but it's kind of it
Well,
can
that's
be a
like
bit
everything,
complicated
I'd say, but
to set up. And Facebook have only gone and made it bloody more complicated now, which is
and probably
bloody
more expensive.
weird.
Okay, well,
yeah,
we'll leave that particular point for
yeah,
the
yeah.
actual
leave it.
show
But I
when
think
you're
we
going through it.
prob-
But
probably,
so we need to wrap up. Really, do you want to make
yes,
a
yeah.
a
But I mean,
final
like,
flourishy statement, Ronnie?
what I would say is, like, I'm in solidarity with anyone who's campaigning to,
Yeah, I think it's important that we're not having a go here. We're
the
just
main,
saying where would it be best? I suppose.
yeah, the urgency, when you spoke about the urgency is in more vegans becoming active. That's where the urgency lies. That's the urgent situation, that we've got all these people, and if people are genuinely vegan, they're vegan for animal liberation. They believe in animal liberation. They want to be liberated. How do they think that animal liberation is going to come about, unless we educate far, far more people to become vegan? How's that? It's not going to happen. So the very thing that they've become vegan for isn't going to happen unless they also become active. You see, so that's what I'd say. That would be my message to non-active vegans. If you want to see the world,
wouldn't you say that there can be a compromise in a sense? Because obviously we're dealing with people's personal and emotional circumstances and all that.
Yeah.
So a lot of the inactive vegans could seek out groups in which to support the active ones, and I think that's probably why the chances are that a lot of the money from the non-active vegans have been funneled into the influencers, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, for instance, like if like our local group, like if we had more funds, we could do more. We could certainly do more, like online stuff, because the adverts that we do cost money, and lots of things like getting leaflets printed and stuff like that, which sometimes has to do, that costs money. So money can help. But in terms of activism, I think that pretty much all vegans can do activism, because I'm not necessarily talking about like kind of big shouty showy things. I'm there's lots of quiet ways in which vegans become active, like as I said, like delivering leaflets and stuff like that, kind of going and helping an information stall, and not even necessarily the first time even talking to the public, but observing how other people do it and gradually learn the ropes, and then you can kind of get to do it yourself. That's
no, Ronnie, if you're talking to a non-active vegan and saying all that, there's some dead easy ways of doing it. Somebody said that Vegan Pixie Warrior has got some videos about that as well. She's got a series, so as I know. I mean, what's stopping them? Is it they're thinking, well, this doesn't sound as though it's going to work?
I think it's I think kind of quite often it kind of can be sort of habits. It's like incorporating something kind of extra into their life, and I mean, we've seen the opposite of this with COVID. That I think the COVID thing.
Don't mention COVID, Ronnie.
No, don't mention COVID. It's not your favourite word at the moment. But
well, funny enough,
it's not going to affect you in this way. But I'm talking about the general lockdown and we weren't able to do the things we used to do. That kind of what happened is, I know quite a lot of people who were active vegans who stopped becoming active because of COVID, and then they haven't started again because they got in the habit of doing other things. They were in a habit of being active. Some of them in the habit of, like, and this includes even organisers that no longer do things. People are in the habit of being activists. People are in the habit of instigating and organising outreach, right? And then the COVID thing came along. They couldn't do it anymore. They got out of the habit of doing it. They got into doing other things. And now that we're able to get out and about again, they haven't restarted again because they've changed their habits. And I think it's just kind of getting someone into the habit of doing outreach and getting them to kind of, give time, because it's all about spare time, isn't it? There are lots of things we have to do in our lives before we do anything else. Like, a lot of people have jobs, have family members maybe to care for, and have rescued animals to look after. There's all these things you have to do before you can go and do outreach. But everyone's got spare time. Everyone's got some spare time, and it's a question of like allocating some of that spare time to doing outreach, instead of whatever you would do in that spare time was watching some shit on the telly or some other bollocks.
Well, we're back to another thing that we've talked about, which is, do you think? I mean, this is a difficult conversation. Do you think people, potential activists, whatever you want to call them, are people in the movement different now than they were before, or are we just looking at the past with rose-tinted glasses?
I think when you talk about the movement, you see, rather than talk about the vegan movement, I prefer to talk about the vegan community, because a movement has to move, and if someone's not active, they don't move, so they're not really part of a movement, are they? But the vegan community,
well, they move every time they go shopping, I suppose.
Well, yeah, it's like kind of, I suppose, in that kind of minor way. But that's that. What they're doing is not buying stuff, isn't it?
Well,
they're not. They're refusing. They're not.
Yeah, but I mean,
negative.
People are probably talking to workmates or schoolmates or whatever, and as well. So
I mean, yes, I mean, there is that little. Yes, I mean,
I don't think there's such a thing as a silent vegan. I mean,
well, I mean, just by being vegan, somebody might think, why is that person vegan, and look into it. Yeah, there is that, but like, we need considering more than that. We need considering more than that. We kind of isn't about people doing the minimum, it's about people doing the maximum, isn't it? It's about we all need to try and do the maximum we can that our lives allow us to do.
Well, it could be that people do whatever they can, but all of us do that, and so that would make a big difference.
But I don't think that's the case, because if you look at
well, that's obviously what I'm saying.
They're not doing that. Most vegans aren't doing the most they can to promote veganism.
So wrapping this up then, but the real problem is not really rescue, and it's not really pressure. It's the fact that we've got a load of people coming into the vegan movement, and they're adopting a plant-based diet and little else. Saying.
Well, it's not. I'd use the word community rather than movement.
Okay.
Because say if someone
vegan
is
business.
Yeah, they're just a big, because say a woman isn't part of the women's movement just by being a woman. She'd have to be active in promoting women's liberation to be part of the women's movement, wouldn't she? And it's the same with the vegan movement. If you're not active in like promoting, veganism, then you're not part of the movement. You're part of the community. So I prefer to use the word community really to describe it. And I think
are we really, Ronnie? Are we really getting to the situation where really what we're talking about is a lot of plant-based people and a lot less vegans? Is that what we're saying?
I think that kind of is the case. I think there are people who adopt a vegan diet for reasons other than animal liberation, but there's still loads of people who are vegan, are genuinely vegan, vegan because they believe in animal liberation, that don't do anything to promote veganism. There's still loads of those people. And the difference was in the old days, although there was like far fewer vegans, the majority of vegans in the old age were activists, whereas that's changed now. And although there are a lot of people who are vegan who call themselves vegan, it's only
in the old days when my hair was dark and you had some.
Yeah, that was, you have to go back quite some while to the days when I had hair. That is really a very long time ago. I still have hair; it's just very fine. But yes, so that was kind of, that's different, and it's just a question of like, that if these people are vegan for animal liberation, that they kind of need to be thinking about like, this spare time I've got available to me after I've done all the things that I kind of absolutely have to do in my life, how can I use some of it, or how can I use as much of it as possible to promote veganism? That's what I'd say to those people to think, because we all have spare time. Even the busiest of us have some spare time that we could kind of, instead of frittering it away on a meaningless,
Well, don't you think that
diversion.
explains why a lot of people go, well, look, I don't have any spare time, but I've got a bit of spare money, so I'll give it to Earthling Ed, or I'll give it to Joey, right?
Well, yes. I think that I think everyone has spare time. Even the busiest people have spare time. Like just traveling around, have some vegan. I have vegan leaflets on me. If I'm on a train going somewhere, I leave one on the seat. Just stuff like that. Just these little things that you can do. Everyone could do that, and everyone could probably do quite a lot more than that. We all have some spare time. Even the busiest of us have some spare time that we could think all the time. How can I promote veganism today? What can I kind of do today? As I go about my life, have I got? I'm going shopping. Have I got half an hour to spare? Can I spend that half an hour going to the local housing estate and door dropping a few leaflets? It's that kind of thinking, and I'll do that. When I go to the nearest town and I go shopping, I'll take leaflets with me, and if I have a little bit of spare time before I'm due to come back home, I'll go and door drop them. It's just stuff like that, and all that added up together with all the vegans we've got.
What about this? Because this has been a problem for not only our movement, but for movements for generations, right? Because when we're doing outreach and actions, we need to look at if we're putting people off, and how can we be more inviting. And so you're getting you'll get different, that's why a lot of people, going back to the corporations almost, is, well, so take it easy, be moderate, don't make big demands, don't.
Well, I think it's kind of how you do it. I mean, like on stores we do, we have like, we have vegan recipe booklets that also include information about like the ethical reasons for veganism, and we'll kind of have signs saying, come to the store, we've got these free vegan recipes, and people come up. That's not at all threatening. You're giving
okay, just feeding into my next time tunnel, Ronnie. Do you get accused, or do you hear this thing that you're asking, Ronnie Lee, you're asking for all or nothing?
No, I'm just asking for all. Nothing doesn't come into
I know, but that's the argument about the thing about.
But it isn't all or nothing. You see,
there is a line saying, if you ask for all or nothing, you'll get nothing.
There is no nothing in it. For every person you persuade to go vegan, you've spared the lives of a large number of animals, because you end the demand. You end that person's demand for those animals to be slaughtered. So there is no nothing. There is no downside to that in that respect. There is no, whether or not we get legislation at the end of the day.
We're bound to put people off, because some people are going to go, oh, that's a bit too much.
We're not going to change everyone, and we don't have to worry about changing everyone, and you don't have to, because we only have to change.
But we would have to worry if there's a large percentage of people we're putting off, wouldn't we?
Well, you just don't. Well, there are ways that you can behave where you don't put people off. If you have like a friendly countenance and you're giving people stuff, giving people food.
Well, so again, the situation in Dublin where we had the vegan street, there was people on one of the Facebook groups criticizing us for being too militant, and they were saying that there you are setting up all these vegan banners that people can't get away from, and you're making us look like extremists, and you're putting people off, and that's just as putting banners on the railings.
But I'd question. I'd say, well, kind of who are you putting off, and are those people really likely? Because I think what happens is that the people you make angry by those things are people that are never going to be with us anyway. You just make your enemies more angry, But people that are potentially, we're looking for the potential kind of converts, and I don't think it puts those people off. We're not going to change everyone. We've just got to change a substantial minority, and some people we just have to let go on their way.
There's an interesting insight from Nella. For conformist, everybody is a militant, which is true, of course, isn't it?
Well,
But the real problem sociologically is that most people are conformists.
Well, I think people are conformists in different degrees. I think people are conformist in different degrees. Yeah, I think everyone is conformist to some extent. But the ones that are like hard line for the existing system and don't want to contemplate change, we're not going to change them. But people who are not so much like that, yes, I think we can, that we can change those people.
Well, what's been said here is something we've talked about, in the sense that there are a few. Again, I alluded to the fact that, are we really saying, or at least saying partly, that what's going on here is we're dealing with different people now, because there's a lot less self-starters. We do notice, and we've talked about it in terms of what we've seen and what goes on in Dublin, what goes on in your area. We've seen that people are waiting around to be told what to do. And that seems to be totally counter-revolutionary to me.
Yeah, I think we have to encourage people to kind of to instigate stuff and to explain to them.
Said that word again.
To instigating stuff isn't as difficult as people might think. It might be somebody, just kind of saying to local vegans.
If you're in the mindset that you've got to wait to be told, then instigating is going to be like a major hurdle, isn't it, Ronnie?
Yeah. Well, yes, if people are in that mindset, but that's the only way. That's the kind of only way forward, really. And like, I suppose we've been an hour and a half nearly, so we better go. But I mean, my final message would be, look, to the vegans out there, look, think about how you can do outreach as much as possible. Can you instigate outreach in your own local area? Get together with other vegans, and let's, if we all do enough of it, we can achieve animal liberation and all these single issues that people are concerned about. Those things will end at the same time. Yeah.
Well, I think that's probably a good place to stop, because we're going to have to eventually
at some stage.
I'm actually quite surprised that my voice has lasted.
You've done very well, Roger, and actually looking, looking okay. So, carry on.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to. I think when I get my tests tonight, I'll wait until tomorrow and do another, because I've got a short show tomorrow, because at the end of my last time tunnel, we were talking about animal rights being squeezed by animal welfare, and there's a few things going on with Tom Reagan and Nancy Reagan's Culture and Animals Foundation, which they started in 1985. And there's a few things that concern me. So I brought a few people together. We've got Wendy, we've got Nella, guest panelist Benny Malone. And really what I'm going to ask them is to reassure me that I'm overacting, because I think there's something dodgy going on. And I don't like it, so.
Yep. So everyone tune into that. But I've got to go, Roger. I'm bursting for a wee now. After
are you now?
And I haven't got my special pants on either. So.
Oh right. Okay.
So take care, everyone.
Will that, Ronnie? And everyone, thanks very much for tuning in.
Yeah.
And,
see you next
we
week.
love you to bits. And goodbye.